That was for 3 years we did Land of the Lost. And so in the morning, I'm crying that my girlfriend is leaving me and I'm having sexual problems and the mafia's after me. And in the afternoon, I'm going, run, Holly, run, there's a dinosaur.
Remember that Saturday morning rush? Cross-legged on the carpet, cereal in hand, watching a family tumble over a waterfall into a world that shouldn't exist. Dinosaurs. Glowing crystals. Those hissing creatures that made you hold your breath. That was Land of the Lost. But behind the rubber monsters were real people. And what happened to them is something nobody saw coming. One ended up in the NBA. One barely survived. One vanished and never came back. Every story here will surprise you. Spencer Milligan, Rick Marshall. Spencer James Milligan was born September 10, 1937 in Oak Park, Illinois. By the time he walked onto the set of Land of the Lost, he was already 37, a working actor with years of stage work and guest spots on shows like Gunsmoke and General Hospital under his belt. The Kroffts needed a rugged, reliable TV dad, and Spencer fit the mold perfectly.
That's why the guy who played Spencer Milligan looked so much like me, because they cast Spencer to look like my dad.
No dramatic audition story, no last-minute miracle. Just a solid actor who showed up ready to work.
I don't know how we got here or why, but I think we're in another world.
And work he did. Rick Marshall wasn't just a father, he was the father. A widowed park ranger who fell through a time doorway with his 2 kids and landed in a world full of dinosaurs, ape men, and ancient lizard civilizations. Rick was the steady hand, the one who kept his fear hidden so his children wouldn't fall apart. He taught them survival, unity, and courage, all while secretly grieving a wife he'd never mention and a normal life he'd never get back. For 2 seasons, Spencer Milligan was the beating heart of that show.
Last night I saw 3 moons in the sky.
3 moons?
And then, just like that, he was gone. See, here's the part they don't tell you in the reruns. While Land of the Lost was selling lunchboxes, toys, Viewmasters, and compasses with the cast's faces plastered all over them, Spencer was still pulling in roughly $500 to $800 an episode. Union scale. No residuals, no merchandising cut, nothing. He asked for what he felt was fair, some share of the fortune being made off his likeness, and the Kroffts said no. So Spencer walked. His character was written out between seasons with a vague explanation about a time doorway. And just like that, Rick Marshall vanished from the Land of the Lost. After the show, Spencer picked up guest spots on Quincy M.E. and The Bionic Woman. He produced a few small indie films, but Hollywood has a short memory, and the steady work dried up. By the late 80s, he was done. He packed up and moved to Door County, Wisconsin, about as far from Los Angeles as a man can get without leaving the country.
I met Sid Krofft. I got the job because I went to a pool party at Sid Krofft's house. I didn't know Sid. A friend of mine who became one of my best friends.
He taught acting classes. He directed local plays. He built a quiet, good life. He married a woman named Carrie in 2002. No biological children of his own, but if you ask Wesley Eure or Kathy Coleman, they'll tell you Spencer was their real father. They still called him Dad decades after the cameras stopped rolling. That bond never broke.
I never saw anybody else come in, like I didn't see another father, brother, or anything like that. Every time I went, it was Wesley and Spencer.
In his later years, Spencer showed up at a few fan conventions. Always warm, always gracious, never chasing the spotlight. He didn't need it. He'd made his peace. Spencer Milligan passed away on April 18th, 2024 in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. He was 86 years old. The cause was never publicly disclosed. The man who kept his TV family alive in a lost world quietly slipped away into his own quiet one, leaving the raft empty, but the memories forever found. Kathy Coleman, Holly Marshall. Kathleen Kathy Buck Coleman was born February 18, 1962 in Weymouth, Massachusetts. She was 12 years old when she landed the role of Holly Marshall, and she earned it the hard way. 7 callbacks. 7 rounds of auditions for a kid who was already doing commercials and modeling.
From the waist down, I was wearing Levi blue corduroy.
Her mother, trying to keep her motivated, promised her a pony if she got the part. Kathy talked about that pony so much on set that the writers actually wrote a horse named Comanche into an episode.
I keep on wishing this was a dream. We'd all wake up and we'd be right back home again.
That's the kind of kid she was. Infectious, persistent, impossible to ignore. And Holly Marshall was all of that. The fearless little sister with pigtails and a checkered shirt who refused to be scared.
I was disappearing from the waist down. Eventually, they put him in a khaki colored shirt and I went to the maroon colored.
Even when she probably should have been. She named the creatures. She stood up to danger. She was the emotional core of the family. The character that every kid watching at home connected with, because Holly was them. Small, surrounded by impossible things, and brave anyway. Kathy stayed through all 3 seasons, but when the show ended, so did her acting career. Almost completely. She stepped away from Hollywood and didn't look back. And what she stepped into was far harder than any Sleestak cave. Her childhood had already been fractured. She grew up without a father. Her mother died when Kathy was just 24. Then came 2 marriages, both abusive. One ended with a shooting incident. Kathy fled for her life. There were stretches of homelessness. There were battles with alcohol. The fearless jungle girl who outran dinosaurs every Saturday morning was fighting real monsters, and doing it without a camera crew or a script to tell her it would all be okay. But she survived. She moved to a ranch in Nevada. She worked a dairy farm. She raised 2 sons, Christopher and Alfonso, and she put the pieces back together on her own terms.
I, on the other hand, had 7 callbacks. On like my 3rd or 4th interview, I walked in and Phil was there.
Years later, she wrote it all down in a raw, unflinching memoir called Run, Holly, Run, a title that says everything about both her character and her life. Today, Kathy Coleman is 64 years old. She still travels to fan conventions, often alongside Wesley Eure, and she's always met with the kind of love that only comes from people who grew up watching you be brave. The fearless jungle girl who outran every Sleestak survived real monsters at home, and finally found her own safe land. Wesley Eure, Will Marshall. Wesley Eure Loper was born August 17, 1951 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. By 23, he was already juggling 2 careers at once, a recurring role as Michael Horton on Days of Our Lives and the part of Will Marshall on Land of the Lost. How he got there is pure Hollywood luck. Sid Krofft spotted them at a pool party, handed him a card, and said, "Come audition." Wesley almost said no. He was already committed to the soap.
We're going to hang out by the pool on Saturday. And I said, oh, okay, I'll go. And I walked in and Sid looks at me and goes, you. He says, I got a new show.
But somehow managed to do both. 128 episodes of Days, 3 seasons of Lost, all at the same time. Will Marshall was the eldest son. Brave, impulsive, sometimes reckless, always the first one charging into danger to protect his little sister.
Are you out of your mind? You can't go walking around the jungle alone. You'll end up as lunch for that tyrannosaur.
He was the kid who wanted to be the hero, even when being the hero meant getting chased through ancient temples by hissing reptile men. Wesley brought genuine warmth to the role, a big brotherly energy that made the Marshall family feel real. But behind that curly-haired smile, Wesley was carrying a secret. In the early 70s, being a gay man in Hollywood wasn't just difficult, it was career-ending. Wesley had a serious relationship with actor Richard Chamberlain, but Chamberlain was nearly 20 years older, and after a few years, he ended it. When rumors about Wesley's sexuality reached NBC, the network released him from his Days of Our Lives contract. Just like that, years of work, gone. Not because of his talent, because of who he loved. Wesley didn't break. He hosted the Nickelodeon game show Finders Keepers. He co-created the Emmy-nominated animated series Dragon Tales for PBS. He wrote children's books. He directed, he taught, he built an entire second career on his own terms. And in 2009, when the Will Ferrell Land of the Lost reboot brought new attention to the original, Wesley finally spoke publicly about his sexuality. He'd spent decades in silence, and he was done. Today, Wesley Eure is 74 years old, splitting his time between Palm Springs and Mexico. He organizes HIV and AIDS fundraisers. He still shows up at conventions with Kathy Coleman, the two of them inseparable after 50 years. Still brother and sister in every way that matters. The curly-haired kid who rafted into danger grew into the steady elder who still guides the whole Lost family home. Philip Paley. Chaka Philip Paley was born September 15, 1963 in Los Angeles. He was 11 when he became Chaka, but the way he got there had nothing to do with acting. At 9 years old, Philip was the youngest black belt in the United States.
Started with my martial arts. I started when I was 4 years old. At the age of 9, I became the youngest black belt in U.S. history.
He appeared on The Tonight Show alongside Chuck Norris, tumbling and kicking for Johnny Carson's audience. Sid and Marty Krofft saw that appearance and thought, that's our ape boy. And what an ape boy he was. Chaka, the mischievous young Pakuni who started as an outsider and became the Marshals' most loyal friend.
there were three of us who played Pakuni. Pakuni was the primate, slash human.
He spoke in gibberish. He pulled faces. He was covered head to toe in fur and prosthetics that took hours to apply and were brutally hot under the studio lights. But Philip made it all work. He gave Chaka a soul, curious, funny, fiercely loyal. And kids absolutely loved him. After the show ended, Philip walked away from acting almost entirely. One small comedy film in 1988 called Beach Balls, an episode of Airwolf, and then silence. He went to school, became a paralegal, built a career in litigation support, and earned his third-degree black belt. He lives a quiet, private life, married, separated, low-key, but he hasn't forgotten. He still shows up at conventions, still flashes that Chaka grin, still makes fans feel like they're 10 years old again. The wild cave kid who grunted his way into our hearts grew up, put on a suit, and never stopped being family. Ron Harper, Uncle Jack Marshall. Ronald Robert Harper was born January 12, 1933 in Turtle Creek, Pennsylvania. He was already a seasoned veteran by the time he joined Land of the Lost in its third season. With a Navy service record and starring roles in 87th Precinct, Garrison's Gorillas, and the TV version of Planet of the Apes behind him. When Spencer Milligan left, the Kroffts needed someone who could step into a father's shoes without missing a beat. Ron Harper was that man. Uncle Jack was Rick's brother, swept into the same bizarre world while searching for his missing family. He was authoritative, resourceful, and not above a little deception or a homemade flare gun when the Sleestaks got too close. Season 3 shifted the show's tone, more mythical, more adventurous, and Ron carried it with the steady confidence of a man who'd been doing this for 20 years. After the show, Ron kept working. Soap operas like Generations, guest spots on Cold Case and Melrose Place, even a small role in Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor. He was one of those actors who never stopped showing up, even if the roles got smaller. In his later years, Alzheimer's quietly began to take hold. Ron Harper passed away on March 21st, 2024, just weeks before Spencer Milligan. He was 91. Two fathers from the same lost world gone in the same season. The uncle who kept the raft steady slipped away months after his TV brother. Two fathers lost to the same quiet jungle. Sharon Baird. Saw Pakuni performer Sharon Baird was born August 16, 1943 in Seattle. Before she was a fur-covered ape woman in a Jurassic jungle, she was an original Mouseketeer on the Mickey Mouse Club in the 1950s, one of the most famous children's shows in television history. The Kroffts knew her work and brought her in as a live-action performer across their productions. In Land of the Lost, she played Sa, one of the Pakuni tribe, communicating entirely through body language, gestures, and expressive eyes beneath layers of heavy makeup. After the show, Sharon kept working, but almost entirely out of sight. She performed in other Krofft productions like Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, always inside full-body costumes, always relying on that dancer's instinct for physical storytelling. And here's a piece of trivia that might blow your mind. Sharon served as a rotoscope model for the 1978 animated Lord of the Rings film. Her movements became Frodo's. A former Mouseketeer playing an ape woman on a dinosaur show who then physically became a hobbit. That's a career arc you couldn't write in fiction. She eventually semi-retired to Reno, Nevada, and still makes occasional appearances at Mouseketeer reunions, always welcomed with warmth by fans who remember her from either end of her incredible career. Her personal life stayed private, a brief marriage in the 60s that ended in '72. No children mentioned, just a long, graceful career spent making other characters come alive through movement. Today, Sharon Baird is 82 years old. The graceful ape who danced behind the magic still pirouettes at reunions, proving some stars never truly fade. Walker Edmiston, voice of Enoch Walker. Robert Edmiston was born February 6, 1926 in St. Louis, Missouri. He was a legend in voice acting long before Land of the Lost, a Krofft regular who'd already voiced characters on H.R. Pufnstuf and dozens of other children's shows. In Land of the Lost, he gave voice to Enoch,
I am of the generation to be born to this place,
the wise Altrusian time traveler, a Sleestak ancestor who served as the show's moral compass, caught between philosophy and survival. After the series, Walker continued voicing beloved characters for over 2 decades, most notably on the long-running Christian radio drama Adventures in Odyssey, where his voice became a staple for an entirely new generation of listeners who had no idea he'd once been a Sleestak philosopher. He also lent his talents to cartoon shows, puppet production, productions, and commercial voiceover work. The kind of career that's invisible to the public, but essential to the industry. But life dealt him cruel losses that no voice could narrate away. He lost his daughter in 1987. His wife Evelyn died in 1998. For a man who spent his career giving voice to characters full of wisdom and hope, the silence of those absences must have been deafening. Walker Edmiston passed away on February 15, 2007 at age 81 from cancer. He was survived by one child. The deep voice that warned of Sleestak danger fell silent too soon, but still echoes through every crystal cave. John Locke, Sleestak leader. Joseph Lockie Jan, known professionally as John Locke, was born October 10, 1927 in Orlando, Florida. A tall character actor with decades of westerns and guest spots on shows like Gunsmoke and Wagon Train, he was the imposing presence behind the Sleestak leader's glowing eyes. No dialogue, no face. Just body language, physical control, and that slow, menacing movement that sent chills down every kid's spine. John also played the mysterious snowman and other creatures throughout the series. Always hidden, always terrifying, always professional. He did it all without uttering a single word, and that silence spoke louder than any villain monologue. After the show, John kept working steadily in television, guest spots on The Bionic Woman, The Dukes of Hazzard, and dozens of other series. He was the kind of actor whose face you might not recognize, but whose work was everywhere. His personal life stayed entirely private. John Locke passed away on October 19, 2013 at age 86 from complications of a stroke. The hissing leader who ruled the caves stepped back into shadow, leaving only the echo of claws on stone. The Sleestak giants, Lambeer, Greenwood, and Boyd. Now here's the part we teased at the beginning. Those towering Sleestaks, the ones who looked impossibly tall and moved with an almost athletic grace, weren't professional actors. They were basketball players. And before we get into who they were, here's a fun piece of behind-the-scenes magic. That eerie, wheezing Sleestak breathing that haunted your nightmares? It was created using an aquarium air compressor. They recorded the bubbling sound and slowed it down. That's it. A fish tank accessory became one of the most unsettling sound effects in 70s television. Sometimes the simplest tricks make the deepest scars. The Krofft specifically recruited athletes over 6 feet tall from UCLA and USC. Kids with the coordination and stamina to endure hours in sweltering rubber suits under hot studio lights. Most went uncredited, but a few went on to do extraordinary things. Bill Lambeer was just 17, a high school basketball recruit from Boston who needed some extra cash. He squeezed into a Sleestak suit for season 1, scared a few million children on Saturday mornings, and then went off to Notre Dame. From there, 4 NBA All-Star selections, 2 championships with the Detroit Pistons, and a reputation as the most ruthless player in basketball. The bad boy who elbowed his way through the league started his career hissing in a rubber lizard suit. You cannot make this up. Today, Bill Lambeer is 68 years old, with a substantial fortune from his NBA and WNBA coaching career. He finds the whole Sleestak chapter amusing. Dave Greenwood was 19, a UCLA freshman, tall and athletic, perfect Sleestak material. He went on to be drafted 2nd overall in the 1979 NBA draft by the Chicago Bulls, and built a solid professional career with the Spurs and Suns. Today, Dave is 70 and living privately. And then there's Bill Boyd, a 6'3" USC forward who wore the green suit for 9 episodes in season 3 and then quietly transitioned into a 40-year career as a real estate broker. Monster to mogul. The Sleestak who spent his days hissing in a rubber suit spent his decades closing million-dollar deals, proving even lizards can thrive in the real world. The portal closed decades ago, but these lives prove the real Land of the Lost was never just on screen. It was the journey afterward. A father who fought for fair pay and was written out of his own story. A 12-year-old girl who survived abuse, homelessness, and heartbreak to find peace on a Nevada ranch. A young man fired from his dream job for being who he was, who built something even bigger on the other side. A karate kid in a fur suit who became a paralegal. A voice actor who buried his daughter and his wife, but kept speaking for imaginary worlds. And a handful of teenage basketball players who traded rubber lizard heads for NBA championships. As of 2026, the survivors still gather at conventions. They laugh, they hug, they keep the theme song playing. The rest are somewhere beyond the mist, forever found in our childhood hearts. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe. We've got plenty more trips through the time doorway coming your way. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.